Anyways, we're in Genesis chapter 30 this evening, Genesis chapter 30. And I named this chapter The Battle of the Babies, and you'll see why. It's actually where we're going to be looking at the formation of the 12 tribes of Israel this evening. So Genesis chapter 30. Jacob, of Abraham, Isaac, and then Jacob. Jacob has traveled to a distant land looking for a bride. And so in those days, you would actually walk, right? So it's quite a long ways. And so his father had done that also to find his bride. But this is the city of Haran. That's Abraham's brother's name. So that city was named after him. And this is a several month, or if you jam, it's quicker than that, obviously. But if you're just camping with a bunch of people and things, possessions and everything, it takes a lot longer. So this is Haran up there where he went. So this is quite a long ways. All right, so now he goes looking for a bride. And he got more than he asked for, as we saw last time, and was tricked by his uncle Laban into marrying two sisters, Leah and Rachel. And it is interesting because the Bible did form one man for one woman in the beginning. It wasn't Adam and Beulah and Mary and, whatever. It wasn't all these names, right? It was one man and one woman. It was acceptable, fairly acceptable in that culture. And many times what would happen with the men going through war or various different things, and life was a lot harsher back then, it was also a way of welfare way back then. And so many times a man would have more than one bride, and sometimes they would have someone they would call a wife, but they would never even treat her like a wife. They would bring her into the house as well. So that wasn't always the case. And I tell you what, scripture-wise, though, you never have a good story about having multiple wives. Polygamy always caused problems, and it still does today. So anyway, so he ended up being tricked into marrying two sisters. The one he first fell in love, though, was with the younger one named Rachel, and he's the one that she is the only one that he wanted for a wife, but he was tricked into marrying the older one first, which was a tradition in their culture. And this older one started getting pregnant. She was more fertile than the younger sister. And so at this point in time, in Genesis chapter 30, she's already given birth to 4 sons. Now Jacob, as you remember from our last time together, he's fleeing to his uncle Laban's house because of his brother Esau wanted to kill him. And then his mom is saying, but don't marry any of these, these people. Marry from somebody, some group of people that we can trust, right? So again, he falls in love with Laban's younger daughter, and he ends up working 7 years for her. And then he realizes in the morning he was tricked. And then he ends up marrying the second one. After the honeymoon phase, he marries her, but then he still agrees to work 7 more years. So within a week or within 2 weeks, he has 2 new wives, right? And so he was fairly upset. And I think he's getting to realize that his uncle isn't quite the straight shooter that he wants him to be. At the same time, he was a deceiver himself. He had ripped off his own brother. And then he gets ripped off by this man. And so the deceiver is getting deceived. Remember, Jacob means heel catcher or trickster, right? Now, the problem with this polygamous marriage is even though he's being honorable in that he married the older daughter, he's very much in love with the younger daughter. And so it's very obvious. And so it brings a lot of sadness to her heart that she's not loved. The older sister is not loved like the younger sister is, right? So at the close of chapter 29, the older sister Leah gives Jacob 4 sons, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. But at this point, Rachel is still barren. You could imagine how that's making her feel, right? And so it's interesting because it seems like God was blessing Leah because she's not in the ideal marriage while Rachel is still barren. And then we're going to see all these children born in the next 7 years of Jacob working for Laban. So all these children are born in the land of Haran. So Genesis chapter 30, verse 1 reads this. Now when Rachel, the loved one, just to keep it straight, saw that she bore Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister and said to Jacob, "Give me children or else I die." And Jacob's anger was aroused against Rachel and said, "Am I in the place of God who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb?" And so that is actually the true answer. That is the right answer. But understand this, for her, the problem was, in ancient times, a woman's sense of worth was based on the children she was able to give birth to. And, sometimes that is in some of our cultures even today as well, and so certainly back then it was a shame to have no children. She felt like something was wrong with her. God was cursing her, all these things, right? And so she says, "I'm going to die if I have no children." Is that true? No. She would have been fine if she didn't have any children. But the irony is that when she has her second-born son, she'll actually die in childbirth herself. Now, one of the things that we do is we misplace where our satisfaction is found. And this is one of the most common things that we do today as Christians. We try to find our satisfaction in so many other places. In this case, Rachel's yelling at Jacob like it's his fault, but he's not God. Now, Romans 8:20 says, "For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, because of him who subjected it in hope." Basically, we've been subjected to futility. Why? Man fell. And so things aren't going to work quite the way they're supposed to. And I often have to remind myself, and I often have to remind others, this ain't heaven. We got so much to look forward to. And the blessing of being a believer is this is as bad as it gets because it just gets better. We get to rule and reign in a millennial period, and then we get to have this eternal state in the presence of God, the streets of gold place, right? The New Jerusalem type of place. So, but basically there's an emptiness in our life. There's a thing we're reaching for that we get frustrated and we really can't get to that fullness. And everything lets us down to a point, right? And whether it's that new car, you buy something on eBay or Amazon and it comes and then it's not quite what you think it is. Now, through the years, I've bought, probably 50 or 60 surfboards, and I always think the next one is the answer. But it's still just a surfboard, and it's not going to make me surf like the best surfer on earth, But in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, yeah, it's the answer. But whatever it might be, and your car. We buy cars in South Texas to watch them rust out and rot out, don't we? And how long is it before you start to rub, you start to wash your car, and all of a sudden the rubber is starting to come off on your rags. And it just happens, right? I mean, it's just everything rots and rusts. But we're subject to this. This is this side of heaven. And it's God showing us there's something more. We need him. So she was looking to her spouse. And we try everything to fulfill that emptiness, but it shows us that we can. She should have been going to God. God, help my heart while I wait for you to open my womb. But others try to fill the emptiness with sex, drugs, alcohol. Others with sports, entertainment, video games, buying things. Now, my wife and I like to go to thrift stores. And I like to be with her when she goes to anything other than a thrift store because it scares me. But it's like, oh, it's going to make me feel better. How many shoes do I need? But it's still going to be found empty. And then we get married, and then we think, oh, that's going to be the answer. So that person thinks you're the answer because they're empty, and the other person thinks you think the other person's the answer, but they're empty, and so you're both looking to emptiness, trying to suck something out of each other to bring fulfillment, and you can't do it without the Lord. And we're always looking for something. So whether it's a relationship, whether it's foul things, or whether it's just accomplishments, seeking degrees or education or power in government or something like that, we always find that that it's empty, but in the Lord we can have hope. And that's where in the New Testament it says godliness with contentment is great gain. And so as we walk after the Lord and do things his way, which are absolutely opposite of the way that our flesh thinks that we should be satisfied, it's better to give than to receive. And we know that to be true because we've probably practiced it all in this room, and what a blessing it is to go minister to someone else and be tired on someone else's behalf and care about them more than yourself for a little while. But then we just go right back to it. I want to be served. I want to be blessed, right? And so there's this emptiness. And then you may become a Christian but still feel empty. But what we do is we kind of add the Lord to our life instead of putting him at the top of our life. And then everything takes its rightful place. And then your home is a tool instead of an idol. And then your marriage is a tool instead of an idol. And then your children are arrows in God's quiver instead of an idol. And it just goes on. And then your work is a tool instead of an idol. Your ethnicity and your gender are no longer a way to, La Raza or Black Power or White Power, whatever. That's never going to give you satisfaction. Your whiteness, your blackness, your Hispanic, your whatever you are, it's a tool God gave you to minister in a specific way. What a blessing. Look at it that way. But you put God on top, and then he takes everything that you are and he puts it in its proper place. And that's the only way to find satisfaction. But guys, I tell you what, in this world, it is not easy to stay there, is it? What do pastors do? Pastors teach this, we know this, and then we think, the bigger the church is, the better. Now, you guys need to know, Sunday freaks me out. Because I'm thinking we're going to get that sanctuary remodel. It's going to be beautiful. We got a beautiful foyer going in over there. It's coming along. Really, I was amazed how much work they've gotten done over there. And then I'm thinking, okay, now we got to do 3 services. Oh no, what are we going to do? But we look for that. We want people to know our name. We want to be invited to this or that or the other. We want to show up in the magazine of our trade or whatever it is, and we're always looking, and it's always a temptation. So what do we need to do? We just really need to anchor our person in Jesus, in the fulfillment that he offers in him, in our identity and who he is. And we just need to be there. And so whether it's a small trial or a big trial, he's going to fill that hole. My mom used to have this guy come to her preschool because she was a preschool director, and his name was a Donut Man, and he'd sing this song, because there's a hole in the middle of your heart. And he's talking about Jesus filling the hole in the center of your heart. And so I need a baby, else I die, and she's looking to her husband, but he's not the answer. So she said in verse 3, this is Rachel, "Here's my maid, Bilhah. Go into her, and she will bear a child on my knees, that I may also have children by her." And then she gave him Bilhah, her maid, as a wife, and Jacob went into her. And so in those days, what would happen is, the wife would set her maid on her lap, and they would have intercourse, and if she got pregnant, she would consider that baby hers. And that's what they would do in ancient days. So it wasn't like they're going out on a hot date or something, okay? So she's a surrogate mother. Now Jacob had sexual relations with her instead of saying, no, let's trust and wait upon the Lord, right? We don't know how he would have gotten the 12 tribes if that were the case, if the maids didn't jump in. But you know what? If they didn't sin, God could have done it, right? But a fleshly answer to a spiritual problem or to God's promises doesn't really bring about, the fullness of God's promises, right? So, verse 5 goes on, it says, "And Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. Then Rachel said, God has judged my case, and he has also heard my voice and given me a son. Therefore she called his name Dan." Now, the commentator Barnhouse says, can a woman get so low that she will hit her sister over the head with a baby like Rachel did? So God judged me as good. Look at this. And so she's using the child's name to show it to her sister, because Dan means judgment, or I'm justified, right? And if you know the name Daniel, it means judged by God. And so that's that idea behind that. Verse 7 goes on. It says, Rachel's maid Bilhah conceived once again and bore Jacob a second son. And then Rachel said, with great wrestlings I have wrestled with my sister, and indeed I have prevailed. So you can see this. This is battle of the babies going on, right? Now here's something funny about what's happening in our life. Like we now have 3 grandsons, and my daughters are battling for the first granddaughter. because they know that's going to be really special, right, to them. But we're like kind of feeding it. Just kidding. We're not. we're happy if it's all boys. That's all right. But so this is happening. And she says, indeed, I have prevailed. And she called his name Naphtali, which means my wrestling. I've been wrestling and I've fought for this. So again, the envy rears its ugly head. I've wrestled for this and I have prevailed, right? And she's using her children's name as a tool against her sister. Verse 9 goes on, it says, when Leah saw that she had stopped bearing, she took Zilpah, her maid, and gave her to Jacob as a wife. And Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a son. Then Leah said, a troop comes. So she called his name Gad. And Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a second son. Then Leah said, I am happy, for the daughters will call me blessed. And so she called his name Asher. So not to be outdone, she sees what her sister does. She's not having children at this point in time. And so she does the same thing, gives her maidservant Zilpah to Jacob to have children by her. And so this competition continues to grow. And so Gad means troop or good fortune. And the second son is called Asher, which means happy. Now I'm happy. And it's interesting because she's not, I'm happy to bring the Lord a man-child or anything like that. She's like, I'm happy. And she says, now the maidservants, the other ladies will be impressed with the fact that I now have 6 sons. And so she's not even doing it for the Lord. She's not doing it for her husband. She's doing it to show off to the ladies. And so what we have here is we have selfish, envy, and greed. The unholy trinity of me, myself, and I. And so this is what they're doing. They're competing with one another. So Leah was, Leah, I got it in the wrong place. Okay, I missed one. Leah went from praising the Lord to a downward spiral in which she's being petty now with the names of her children. Remember, she felt blessed, like, God, you've made up some things for me, and, praise God. Now, James 4:1 says, where do wars and fights come from among us? Do they not come from your desires for pleasure that war in your members? You lust and you do not have. You murder and covet and you cannot obtain. You fight and war, yet you do not have because you do not ask. And you ask and do not receive because you ask amiss that you may spend it on your pleasures. Adulterers and adulteresses, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Whoever therefore wants to be a friend with the world makes himself an enemy of God. And the whole idea is just getting into this whole cycle of I want, and it's all about me. It's very interesting because years ago, our church, I don't know, it was several hundred people, probably 300 people or so. And somebody left the church because they missed a week and somebody didn't call them or I didn't call them. And I'm like, okay. But then that very same week, somebody called me up and they said, I'm out of town. And just in case you noticed that I wasn't there, I didn't want you to worry about me. You guys see the difference? The difference was, Pastor, I want to bless you. And I don't know if you'll notice I'm there or not, but just in case you do, I want you to know I'm good. But the other one was testing everybody around them. Oh, you didn't call me. Right? But who does that person call? Right? And that's why it's good. You get in a church and you become known by a smaller group in the church. I mean, the Lord, the creator of the universe, as a man, had 12 guys close to him. Right? Yeah, and every elder is supposed to know all 300, 400, 500, 600 people that attend that church in a month, and it's almost impossible, But the thing is, we're not meant to be selfish. We're meant to want to give to others more than testing everybody. Are they applauding me enough? Are they blessing me enough? And we tend to look at things this way, and we become a pity party guy, right? And I don't know who I shared this with, if I shared this with the church, but it's so funny because in marriage sometimes you feel like You feel like there's times when you feel like you love the other person more than they love you. And it may or may not be true. It may just be a pity party. But we go through emotions, right? We go through these feelings, right? So Noreen was having a rough time, and I felt like I was really pouring out. And I started having a pity party. And I don't like Rod in his pity parties. I don't like the way I look when I'm being that way. And so you know the attitude I copped? My poor wife. I get to see her and have feelings and love her, and she looks at me and she's thinking about all these other things and frustrated. What a bummer. But man, I get to love her. Right? Like I get to love. And this is what we do. Like the greatest name in heaven is the greatest servant of all, Jesus Christ, right? That's what Philippians chapter 2 tells us. And then what do we say? Well, I'm not going to serve my sister until she serves me, Mary and Martha. Or at work, I'm not going to do that because they didn't do that. And what is that? Is that Christian at all? That's just the opposite. And again, the simple saying we have in this church that fits so many scenarios is, in the end, it's a blessing to be a blessing. And so my wife and I now have this attitude that we try to outserve one another. Oh, I did the dishes. No, I'll do the laundry. No, I'll do the laundry. No, I'll do the, like this kind of, this thing. But it's fun to play that game because we both know that we can be selfish. We're not perfect at it or anything else. It's just this game that we play because we do know that it's a blessing to be a blessing, And I did cop the attitude in marriage that I want to be the first one to ask for forgiveness instead of the second one, and we play this game, And so these ladies have just gotten into the flesh. And the Lord says, when you get selfish, it's the flesh. He says it's of the world. You're loving the world. You're loving the way the world does things. And God calls us to be different. I had a friend that's a missionary still today. It's been many decades now, but we helped him plant a mission center in Mexicali, Mexico, right across from Calexico, south of California. And when he got saved, he has all these crazy stories because he was a really successful drug dealer. He wasn't addicted, but he was a good drug dealer, And then he gets saved, right? But he was a good mechanic, and so he worked in this mechanic shop. And sometimes it's downtime; you don't have a car to work on, and so he cleaned up his area. He made it all nice. And everybody's looking at him like, "You're trying to make yourself look better than us." So then, on the rest of his downtime, he cleaned up their areas too. And they're like, "What are you trying to get out? What are you trying to prove?" I go, "No, I know I like mine clean. You don't like your room clean? I'll leave it alone." That kind of thing. But he just wanted to be a blessing wherever he went. So going on, that was a side there. But going on, Genesis 30, verse 14, it says, "Now Reuben went in the days of wheat and harvest and found mandrakes in the field." So this is one of the older sons. "And brought them to his mother, Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, 'Please give me some of your son's mandrakes.' But she said to her, 'Is it a small matter that you have taken away my husband? Would you take away my son's mandrakes also?' And Rachel said, 'Therefore he will lie with you tonight for your son's mandrakes.' When Jacob came out of the field in the evening, Leah went out to meet him and said, 'You must come in to me, for I've surely hired you with my son's mandrakes,' and lay with her that night. And God listened to Leah, and she conceived and bore Jacob a fifth son. Leah said, 'God has given me my wages because I have given my maid to my husband.' So she called his name Issachar." So again, Reuben's out in the field, finds some mandrakes. Now, they believed in those days that mandrakes in the Hebrews are actually called love apples. And the idea is that an aphrodisiac and also create greater fertility in women. And so Rachel wants more children, and here's an opportunity. And so she absolutely, manipulates her sister into getting these mandrakes. And so here's Jacob. He's the father to the children of 4 different women, and he's not doing too well. He loves Rachel. And the other women recognize that, especially Leah. and he was satisfying his flesh with the other 3 women, but there was no emotional ties with them. Now, Barnhouse makes a good observation. He says, is it any wonder that this family had a history of strife and bloodshed? Children reflect the atmosphere of the home. And so if you look at the further stories as this tribe goes further, they do some very brutal things, and they do some very unethical things as well. And they're not being raised in the way that they should be. So it's played out further, as we will see. Now later, Leviticus 18:18 forgives the marrying of sisters, and this is one reason why. The other reason why is genetics are getting worse and worse and worse, right? And then so you can create more problems that way. But this 5th son is Issachar, and his name means reward. Verse 19 goes on, it says, then Leah conceived again and bore Jacob a 6th son. And Leah said, God has endowed me with a good endowment. Now my husband will dwell with me because I have borne him 6 sons. So she called his name Zebulun. And after she bore a daughter and called her name Dinah. So now you have Jacob's 10th son born to Leah, named Zebulun, meaning dwelling. And what is she saying? She's saying, 6 sons, 1 daughter, now he'll dwell with me. Now I'll be, and she's still hoping in this manipulation, in this baby battle, that she's going to win him over. And she's using her children as tools to do so. And then the first daughter is born, and her name is Dinah, and she plays a large part in moving forward, as we'll see. Then God remembered Rachel, verse 22, and God listened to her and opened her womb. So she's praying to God now, not yelling at her husband. And her womb is opened, and she conceived and bore a son and said, God has taken away my reproach. So she called his name Joseph and said, the Lord shall add to me another son. So again, it was the Lord who opened her womb. Joseph means may he add or added. And it would seem that Rachel possibly is gloating here. And she will have another son, but as we will see, she will die in the birth process of Benjamin. And these are the children where we get the 12 tribes of Israel. And so it's interesting. So this man, Jacob, is now the father of the 12 tribes of Israel, and he's in that line, the line of the Messiah. Does he deserve that? At this point, from his escapades, does he deserve to be the father of the nation that would bring forth the Messiah? No. But God did use him, and God will use people who are not perfect, and praise the Lord for that. He uses us, he uses people like the disciples, and we're thankful for that. But what is he looking for? He's just looking for us to open up a little bit. With a little bit of faith, and I would say a little bit of faith each day is going to keep you moving down that road. And you ever hear the statement, give an inch, he takes a mile? I think the Lord will do that with us. If we start to give in a little bit, we're going to grow. And you do that for 365 days a year, what's going to happen? You're going to grow. A lot of people ask us, how'd you get from Chino, California, and being on staff at this mega church out to Corpus Christi, Texas? And I always say, one day at a time, one faithful day at a time. And so it might have been 10 faithful days and one pretty bad day, and then more faithful days. But God got us where he wanted us to be. And that's how, it's not like we always look at these people, oh, they're a superstar and I want to be like them overnight. Nope, that's not how it happens. It's faithful steps each day. Verse 25, and it came to pass when Rachel had borne Joseph, that Jacob said to Laban, send me away that I may go to my own place and to my own country, and give me my wives and my children for whom I have served you, and let me go, for you know my service which I have done for you. And Laban said to him, please stay if I have found favor in your eyes, for I have learned by experience that the Lord has blessed me for your sake. So it's around the 14-year point, and he can now leave, and he recognizes this is not my home. My grandpa had a promise, my father had a promise, and that promise is now upon me. And so he recognizes the covenant. He needs to leave. But remember, Jacob, on the way there, I believed it was his salvation experience when he was sleeping on this trip before he got up to Haran, he had seen heaven open up and a ladder and angels going back and forth between the earthly realm and the heavenly realm through this ladder. It's known as Jacob's ladder. And you hear like long stairways called this, or the stairway to heaven. But we know that ladder to be Jesus Christ. He is the way to the Father. And this was revealed to him. But he's not at a point of sanctification. He's still a pretty immature believer at this point in time. We're going to see on his trip back to his homeland, or where he's supposed to be, that he goes by the brook Kidron and he wrestles with God overnight, and then God changes his name from Jacob, or trickster, to governed by God, or Israel, right? So he's saved but not practically sanctified. Now Laban, his father-in-law, has other ideas, and he's selfish. He sees the profit that this man is bringing because God's hand is upon him. Verse 28 goes on, it says, "Name me your wages and I will give it." So Jacob said to him, "You know how I have served you and how your livestock has been with me. For what you had before I came was little, and it has increased to a great amount. The Lord has blessed you since my coming, and now when shall I also provide for my own house? So I've been walking, I've been serving you, and your house is greatly multiplied, and I recognize this. You owe me something." So he says, "What shall I give you?" And Jacob said, "You shall not give me anything if you will do this one thing for me. I will again feed and keep your flocks. Let me pass through all your flock today, removing from there all the speckled and spotted sheep and all the brown ones among the lambs, and the spotted speckled among the goats, and these shall be my wages. So my righteousness will answer for me in time to come, when the subject of my wages comes before you. Every one that is not speckled and spotted among the goats and brown among the lambs will be considered stolen if it is with me." And Laban said, "Oh, that it were according to your word." So he removed that day the male goats that were speckled and spotted, and all the female goats that were speckled and spotted, and every one that had some white in it, and all the brown ones among the lambs. And he gave them into the hands of his sons. And then he put 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flocks. And so Jacob doesn't want this man, and he's been watching him. And he's manipulative. And he can blame or accuse Jacob of stealing and manipulating his wages and everything. And so when you're dealing with unbelievers, you do need to be wise. You do need to be wise. And so he didn't want accusations. And so he says, "What I bring in will be observable for me. You're going to see that God will give me a certain amount, and that will be my wage. So you get these, and I get these, and that'll be my wage, and it'll be obvious because you'll see physically what God gives me." Now Laban agrees to Jacob's deal because he saw that he could manipulate the situation so Jacob would lose big time in this agreement. And he was also suspicious of Jacob. And so he removes all the speckled cattle, goats, and the sheep from the entire herds, and he puts them in the care of his sons, who journeyed 3 days away from Jacob and his herds. So the ones that are going to produce for Jacob, he removes away. So there's no way, right? It's not in their genes to produce this way. And so, it'd still be in their genes hidden, but it's not going to be near as much. But the problem is, you battle God and you're going to lose. It's going to happen. And sometimes we fight God and we lose. We're going to lose. Now, verse 37 goes on. It says, "Now Jacob took for himself rods of green poplar and of the almond and chestnut trees, and peeled right strips in them, and exposed the white which was in the rods. And the rods which he had peeled he set before the flocks in the gutters and the watering troughs where the flocks came to drink, so that they should conceive when they came to drink. So the flocks conceived before the rods, and the rods brought forth streaked and speckled and spotted. Then Jacob separated the lambs and made the flocks face towards the streaked and all the brown in the flock of Laban. But he put his own flocks by themselves and did not put them with Laban's flock. And it came to pass, whenever the stronger livestock conceived, that Jacob placed the rods before the eyes of the livestock in the gutters, that they might conceive among the rods. But when the flocks were feeble, he did not put them in. So the feebler were Laban's, and the stronger were Jacob's. Thus the man became exceedingly prosperous and had large flocks, male and female, servants, and camels and donkeys. So I don't know how this all works, and I've heard people try to say, well, the stripe causes this or whatever, and there's no proof of this genetically, this manipulation. So anyways, he may have prayed, God, what do you want me to do? And so he worked really hard to take these rods and make them striped and everything and put them in the troughs, so on and so forth. And it brought forth the lambs that would bring it to him. But he also separated the strong ones and put them in the watering trough. He had every right to do so. He was making all the money for this man, Laban. Laban's not doing the work. He's doing all the work, right? And so all of a sudden, he's very prosperous. And what did you see that he did here? Well, one, he worked very hard. He attended to the flocks well. He saw the strong ones, and he made sure, that they were procreating, so on and so forth. And he was doing this. So he worked hard at his business, and his goal was to provide for his family. Remember, he's like, I'm providing for your family. I want to provide for my family now. And so he did work hard. And Proverbs chapter 10 says, he who has a slack hand becomes poor, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. He who gathers in summer is a wise son, but he who sleeps in a harvest is a son who causes shame. And so the idea is work hard. Work hard and be faithful. And be satisfied with the fruit of your hands and the fruit of your labor. And one of the interesting things is with young men, and I work with a lot of young men, and I have sons-in-laws as well, they want to jump from thing to thing to thing to thing instead of getting good at something and going in that direction, choosing a direction and working hard in that one direction. But that's, something about our character. If you don't know what you're supposed to do or if it's going to change, just be really faithful with what you're doing right now, because that faithfulness will carry to the next thing. And when you eventually find that good thing that you're supposed to do, you can be faithful. And you may not, quote unquote, be rich, but you're going to provide. And you're going to be satisfied. And I don't know how many of you, but I've heard a lot of stories about some of you who have taken jobs that didn't pay as much money, but they were going to be much more fruitful for your family and your witness. And that's a good thing, because you're paying into eternity when you do that. And that's quite okay, And for me, when I was looking for a wife, I knew I had to find a wife that didn't care if we ever owned a house or not. Now, we've been able to own a house, but we really didn't know if we'd ever be able to own a house. Being a youth pastor in California, I don't know, God may have always had me as a youth pastor in California without any money. That would have been fine, because God called us to something to be faithful. Remember, godliness with contentment is great gain. The love of money. You don't have to be rich to love money. And if you're rich, you don't necessarily love money either. It's the love of money that is the root of all kinds of different evil, and it causes pain in your life. And so work hard and be satisfied with what the Lord brings. So he worked hard, but also the second thing is God was also at work. Why? God wanted to bless him so he could take that down and then also continue to bring forth the line of the tribe of Judah, bring forth the Messiah ultimately. And so God was also at work. Back in the dream in Bethel, God had promised to help Jacob. It says in Genesis 28:15, "Behold, I am with you, and I will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have spoken to you." And so God was also moving. And so a lot of people, well, how much is God and how much is me? And I like the balance of, work like it all depends upon you. Praise and thank like it's all him, But just be a faithful servant, And I just look at the abilities and the things that I'm able to do, and I realize God has enabled me to do things. And so I'm just going to try to do those well. I'm going to work hard at those things that he gives me. If you're apt to do something, do it well as unto the Lord. What a gift from God. And I love in Daniel chapter 5 where you got this guy, Belshazzar, and his ancestor, whether it's his father or his grandfather. It's a little bit confusing. Nebuchadnezzar, seemed to come to know God. But this one was just spitting in God's face, and he was having a party with the utensils out of the temple that his grandfather had taken. And he was praising the gods of wood, hay, and stone, idols with these things. And the concubines were partying that night, right? And someone called Daniel because there was some handwriting on the wall. A hand appeared. It says, Tekel, Tekel, Mene, Upharsin. And they wanted to know what it says. And he was literally shaking in his boots. Some people say when it says his loins loosed, it means that he pooped himself. He was fearful. And his grandmother said, I know a prophet that can interpret that. And he interpreted it for him. And then he says this to Belshazzar. He says, you praise the God of wood, hay, stone, and stubble, but the God who holds your very breath and every step in your hand, you refuse to worship. This is a pagan. But God gives every pagan every step and every breath that they have. And the hard thing is, you think about it. If you're an unbeliever, you don't give God credit for anything. You think it's you. And for us, we think, God, thank you for everything. If you're intelligent, thank you for my intelligence. If you're strong, thank you for my strength. Whatever it might be, we are thankful for that. So God was also at work. He says, I'm going to bless you. And so the key is hard work and God's help equals blessed results. And sometimes it brings financial success, but if you're really working hard and seeking God at the same time, you're going to be way more satisfied in life than other people who are just trying to work the system. Keith Green, I don't know if many of you know him, but he was an old hippie singer that died before his time. Very convicting guy, pretty fun to listen to if you look him up. Crazy, wild hair, but very convicting. And he said this, keep doing your best and pray that it's blessed. And Jesus takes care of the rest. Be faithful. It's funny, I put away money finally, because for many, many decades of my life, I was never able to put away money because we were always struggling financially. And just the last few years, we've been trying to catch up and trying to put money into a retirement account. And Fab always tells me, don't freak out, don't freak out. And I go, I'm just going to be faithful and keep on plugging it away and trying to put it in good investments. That's fine, but I don't look at it every day. You know why? I'm working hard, and I'm working for Jesus, and I'm trusting in him, and I'm trying to keep on walking with him, and keep doing your best. And so whether it goes up and down, I don't have a heart attack one way or another. In fact, I don't look at it that day when everybody gives all the warnings, because it's already gone, right? Like, what good does that do me? I'm trying to prepare Bible studies and teachings for all, the church, and it's just going to distract me. I'm just being faithful and plugging away, and in a sense, it's the long game, isn't it? You know what my long game is? Heaven. That's my long game. This earth, this ain't heaven, and here's the thing. I know if I don't have enough retirement, I know someone will take me in if I need it, and I'm going to be surrounded by loving people. And I'm going to be richer than rich people who have nobody around them because they've sacrificed all their relationships just to get a little bit more. And that's how it goes, guys. And so I always tease my daughters, and my wife always wants to spoil my daughters, right? And I'm like, listen, it's okay. She can buy you this birthday present now, but you're just going to have to take care of us in our old age, okay? Keep doing your best and pray that it's blessed, and let Jesus take care of the rest. Let's go ahead and pray. Dear Lord, we thank you for your word. We thank you just for these lessons that we can get out of the Old Testament, Lord. And we're also thankful for the satisfaction that we can have in you. as we walk through this life, Lord. And Lord, help us to put you at the top, as Rachel didn't at first, and then it seems she prayed and you opened her womb, God. May we learn that lesson from her and not have to keep on learning it ourselves, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen.